Hello, I'm Ben Orchard.
And I'm Claire Fitzpatrick.
Welcome to Sword, Sorcery and Synthesizers, the 80s fantasy movie podcast. I'm coming to you from Adelaide.
And I'm in Brisbane.
But through the wonders of modern technology and the magic of Skype, we meet each week to discuss some beloved movie of a bygone era and see what lies behind the nostalgia. So, Claire, this morning, it's fresh in your mind, you just finished watching the 1989 film Paperhouse, is that right?
Yeah, I did. And it was a wild ride. It was awesome. I'm just going to say it's amazing. Out of everything we've watched, it was my favorite so far.
That is quite an incredible feat, considering, didn't you say about the first film we did, Never-Ending Story, that was one of your favorites since childhood? If Paperhouse has managed to top that, that's quite an achievement, really.
I know, and it's so weird. About 50 minutes in, I was like, okay, this is cool. Halfway, I was like, yeah, I'm really invested in this. I'm really into this. And by the end of the film, I was like, I love this movie. So I was very excited, and I have never been this excited after watching a movie, and I've never been so excited and thrilled to talk about it with you. So it's very cool.
I'm so glad I recommended it to you. I mean, one of the things I've always had a great fear of in doing this podcast is I'll recommend some old favorite of mine from way back, and I'll be so carried away with my enthusiasm that I might oversell it or overhype it, and then by the time you get around to watching it, it'll be like, oh, that was it.
No, a lot of the things that you recommend, I really enjoy. But I think this film leaned more into my personal interests. So obviously we have our shared overlapping interests and why we do this podcast. We both love fantasy films, 80s fantasy films, but this specifically had so many elements that I just love. And by the end of the film, I was thinking to myself, why haven't I seen this before? Why haven't I heard of this? Why isn't this more well known? And I was Googling it and just trying to find facts about it because I really enjoyed it.
All right, well, to address some of the things you just brought up, Paperhouse is a small, independent British film that was made in the late 80s. It's based upon a children's book called Marianne Dreams by Catherine Storr that was first published in 1958. It's faithful to the book in the broad strokes of it. The story has been updated to the 1980s when the film was made. It has a different title, and a few of the characters have slightly different names. The main difference, I guess, is one of tone. The original children's book is kind of whimsical. I mean, it touches upon some dark themes, but it mostly has a very sort of, light, breezy prose style. The film Paperhouse is kind of, I guess, a gothic horror children's story. A sort of surreal journey into the realms of nightmares. It was directed by Bernard Rose. It was one of his earlier films. He would become much better known later for two things. A horror film called Candyman in the early 90s that was based on a Clive Barker story, and a very romanticized screen biography of Beethoven called Immortal Beloved. The writer was a guy called Matthew Jacobs, whose sort of dubious claim to fame other than Paperhouse was writing this 90s TV movie of Doctor Who starring Paul McGann, which was, often criticized at the time of its release for adding a whole lot of gothic horror tropes to Doctor Who. Rather like this adaptation sort of takes a darker, sort of nightmarish approach to this whimsical children's story.
Well, before we speak about it, I just wanted to point out about 4 underlined sentences that I wrote.
Oh yes, because you take notes when you're watching.
I do. I take notes when I write. Lots and lots of notes, sometimes pages of notes as I'm watching. The first one, about halfway down, is this a fever dream? Underline. And then another one is, why is the dad so creepy? Underlined. A little more down, why is it such a scary, horrific movie? Underlined. And right at the end, I wrote, I would call this surreal horror, circled. Then I have a little arrow, and I wrote childhood trauma, underline, underline. So I have quite a lot to say about it, and I definitely think that it's like knowing that it's the same person who did all these other kind of creepy things, it makes sense.
Well, you brought up a good point. Is this a fever dream? Because there's some debate amongst fans as to whether this is a fantasy story where, magical psychic phenomena is happening, or whether all of the sort of, dark phantasmagorical imagery is just a figment of the main character's imagination.
Yeah.
I mean, the main story is about this girl named Anna. She has glandular fever and she's bedridden and amusing herself by, drawing in a notebook. And in her dreams, everything that she draws comes to life. And it's called Paperhouse because she draws this elaborate house full of all kinds of quirky, objects. And over time, her dreams start to overlap with another sick boy who has muscular dystrophy, a boy named Mark. And they sort of meet each other in the dream world. Or that's one possible interpretation anyway. You could think that, he's a figment of her imagination as well.
About 20 minutes in, maybe half an hour, one of the notes I wrote was, is the boy her dad? Obviously not. But that was one of the things, because I was like, there are so many things happening. I was like, is this a fever dream? Is this really happening? Is this all in our head? And then I started getting all these really outlandish ideas and thoughts, and it just made me think any explanation could be possible. It was kind of like that, anything and nothing. That makes sense.
I think that there are enough clues scattered throughout the film that what is actually occurring is some kind of psychic phenomena and not just in her head. I think one of the main things is that the doctor who's treating her is also treating Mark, the disabled boy. And the thing is that she knows his name from her dreams before the doctor tells her about him. And I think that's as good a clue as any that there must be something going on here. Yeah. Although it's never explained why her dreams are so vivid, why her drawings come to life in her dreams, why her dreams are overlapping with the boy's dreams. As for the connection with her father, this is something that the film has sort of elaborated on that isn't in the book. Mm-hmm. What happens in the film is that the mother and father are separated. It's implied that he has a job that means he goes away on extended business trips, and he's also a recovering alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the moments where her father appears in her dreams as a sort of scarred, Frankenstein-style creature, I think it's meant to reflect the trauma that she feels from dealing with his alcoholism.
Yeah. See, I wasn't sure at first what it was. I thought, okay, obviously this is her father, but I think because the film is so surreal, my mind was like whirring with so many possibilities. I was like, okay, what did this guy do? I was like, is this a really bad guy? Is he been hurting her and her mother, or is this her just kind of picking up on the tension and the stress she can feel from her mother? And I think I really liked that because I didn't know, and I kept thinking about it the whole way through the movie. It was just I don't like this man. she doesn't like this man. Like, what's wrong? What's the problem here? So I liked that it was this creepy figure, I guess.
It is one of many things that the film introduces and then sort of leaves up to the audience's imagination to figure out, for better or for worse. We don't find out exactly how bad his drinking problem was, or whether he was like physically violent. I'd like to think that he wasn't, because at the end of the film, she manages to reconcile with her father. He gets sober and cleans himself up, and they're a family again. Although reconciling what she's seen of his behavior when he's intoxicated with, his clean and sober self is difficult, even when he's making a sincere effort to be, affectionate and attentive to her needs. So you can see, I don't know, it's a rocky road to redemption for his character. But I think it also touches upon the way that children sometimes blow things out of proportion because they don't know the whole situation. And she often, Anna, the child in this film, often sort of acts out or, lashes out in anger at like her parents for slight things because she can't understand why they're so wrapped up in their jobs or their relationship and can't pay her attention or whatever.
I think that's interesting you say that, because the very last comment that I actually made was, childhood worries, fears, and emotions are valid. This stresses the importance of believing in yourself, which is sort of what I think the whole movie to me was about. And so it made me think of like her stress and her fears about her parents and like her dad's issues and problems with her mum, and the whole idea that she's observing this behavior of her parents, of her dad, and that maybe, everyone in her life are dismissing of it. Or it's not that big a deal, and, she's told to sort of basically get over it in a way. But did you think that idea of like, childhood feelings are valid or anything like that, of when it comes to the issues of like her dad's alcoholism and her behaviors towards that, and like her, I'm thinking of the way to say that. Didn't say. So I'm trying to think of the way.
Her priorities in terms of trying to understand all the nuances of her parents' relationship. I think that's part of the whole point, is that she doesn't understand everything. One of the things I like about Paperhouse is that you have this 11-year-old girl who is, dealing with trauma, dealing with, her parents are having a rocky relationship, her dad's a recovering alcoholic, and she has glandular fever that leaves her bedridden, having fainting spells, having, headaches and high temperatures. She's going through all these things. But I like how it presents her as having flaws as a person. Yeah. She is, she is sometimes very cheeky and petulant with her. She has trouble at school, and these things aren't really related to the trouble that she's having at home or the trouble with her illness. And she, is sometimes, brash and impulsive in the way she acts, just to sort of get attention from, the grown-ups around her that she thinks, aren't paying attention to her emotional needs. I mean, she's a brat sometimes, it must be said. But I think all of these things like humanize the character, and I like the fact that, despite all the hardship she endures, like she's not an angel. But like she's never characterized as some kind of saintly victim for all of the hardship that she goes through. And I think the flaws sort of humanize the character and in a way add layers of internal conflict to the character's relationships, so that it isn't just about, her beating the illness.
Yeah. Like, I didn't even think of that. I didn't think of that at all. Or the main thing that I was thinking as when I was watching it was, why is no one listening to this child? Like, I didn't think of it as, okay, she's a child who's, the whole story of the boy who cries wolf, children are acting out to get attention, things like that. And upon reflection, like thinking back on the film, yes, I can see that. But while I was watching it, I didn't think that. I just thought, why not listen to this child? She's repeatedly saying she's unwell. She's repeatedly trying to get attention, but it didn't seem to be in a bad way. Like, I know she has the issues and, the teacher's been keeping her out of the classroom and keeping her in the hallway. But watching that, I did not see that as a child who was being naughty. I saw that as a child who it just seemed like, no one was just listening to her. And I don't know if that's just me.
Maybe it's just that you're a better parent than the characters in the movie. Because, okay, like the characters, the mum and dad, played by Glenn Headley and Ben Cross, they're quite forward characters themselves. I mean, I mentioned the dad, his recovering alcoholism and how the mum is sort of left shouldering the load in terms of having to work and, support everyone through all this financially. So it's sort of like she's stressed in terms of like maintaining a healthy work-life balance.
And I actually really personally kind of identified with the mum, and then I felt conflicted. I have a lot of responsibilities as a single parent of 2 children who are 11 years apart, right? So it's extreme difference, but it's also the one thought that I thought was, why haven't her mum taken to the hospital? Like I know that she has all these issues and she's stressed and everything, but like,
I think the reason that they don't take her to the hospital is that they're fortunate enough to have they do towards the end when her illness gets really bad. But at the start, they're fortunate to have a regular GP who does house calls. And maybe this is just, a quirk of the, English medical system in the 1980s. Yeah. Having a GP who can do house calls like that. Or maybe they just figured it's saving money if we, don't take her to the hospital until things get really bad.
Yeah. And I was actually thinking, is that a cultural difference or is that like a difference between times? And was that completely normal back then? And in that time and in that place? Or was I just being too snobbish or mean against the parents?
It has been a while since I've read the novel. I read it about 4 years ago, Marianne Dreams. I can't remember if the doctor does house calls in the novel or not. I do remember that the family at the heart of the story have a much more conventional, much more functional relationship. They get along a lot better. Yeah. And a lot of the tension has been sort of invented for the film. And this is sort of what I mean about the film being, faithful to the book in the broad strokes of like the most important plot points are there, but the tone is often very different and much darker. I mentioned that the dreamworld, the Paperhouse that she draws and shares with this other sick boy is a lot darker and more nightmarish. The relationship with the boy is sort of, I guess you could call it puppy love, something like that develops between them. I mean, they kiss at one point. Yeah. It's the relationship is a lot more just a straightforward friendship in the novel. In the film, the initial relationship is a bit tense, sometimes argumentative, and it takes time for them to trust each other and establish a friendship. And I can't remember if the boy dies at the end of the book. I don't think he does, because I think that the author, Catherine Storr, who wrote Marianne Dreams, wrote a sequel. I haven't read the sequel, so I don't know what happens there.
Well, one of the notes that I had was, is Mark dead? About like halfway through. Because I was just thinking, is he like, what is this? Is this some kind of like, is this in a fever dream relationship, friendship with this person? But I didn't think all the way. I thought maybe halfway through he may have passed away, but she was still having this bond, this friendship.
I believe that he died in the real world.
Yeah.
but he appears in the helicopter in her dreams at the end.
Yeah.
So a part of his spirit lives on in her dreams.
Yeah. But like I did think that about halfway through like the movie. Even though I think maybe toward the end you're supposed to think that he dies at the end, or I'm not sure, but like yeah. Halfway through I was like, is he dead? I think he is. And somehow in this weird spirit world kind of connection thing, maybe she's still communicating with him in some way. I wasn't sure how.
I wonder if you would call Paperhouse magic realism, because I think that's what it's called when you have a story that's sort of grounded in like the kitchen sink realities of day-to-day life, but there's these odd fantasy elements thrown in that aren't given any explanation and remain sort of remote and mysterious. I think that's sort of what we're dealing with Paperhouse.
I actually, like, one of the other notes that I said was this is actually a very cool childhood film about death. And which maybe that's just me taking that away from it. And if he does die or anything like that, maybe this is just the kind of surrealist kind of fantasy take on death. But again, like, because I've only just watched it, I haven't looked up reviews, I haven't looked up anyone else's thoughts.
I could see how, it supports multiple interpretations.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard people who say it's all just a dream. I've heard other people talk about how it represents like a psychic nexus, this sort of dream world that the two characters enter. If you want to see it as just, a really elaborate, vivid fever dream that this young girl is having that's reflective of her insecurities and, her anxieties, her distrust of the adults around her, then you can read it like that. If you want to see this as like a genuine case of like, I don't know, supernatural forces at work and, bringing people together, in a different realm, a psychic realm, I think you can do that as well.
I love that. I love that there's so many ideas and interpretations. Because like just as I was watching it, I just kept thinking like so many different things. Like as each thing happened, I just thought, okay, this is real, it's not real, it's a dream, it's not a dream. Is he dead, is he not dead? And I kept changing my mind. And I think that's one of the elements of it that I really liked, is that it wasn't linear in the way that I thought, okay, this is happening, this is a dream, and that's it. It was, is it? Is this a fever dream? Is this a real place? Can you go here? And I really liked that, because it just didn't seem, to me, watching it, so straightforward.
I would say that this is a film that captures, to my mind, what being trapped in a dream is like. If you've had a dream that you vividly remember that you were uncomfortable with and you felt trapped within it. Because, well, first of all, I think it captures, a child's perspective on art a lot better than, some other films that try to do so, because I like the fact that when she's drawing in her notebook, the pictures that she's drawn aren't like a prodigy, like an artistic prodigy. She draws like a typical, like, child's drawing would be. The Paperhouse is a crude picture. It's very simple and it's very sort of like the perspective is all off, that sort of thing. And when you see her enter the dream world and she enters like the physical Paperhouse made manifest, you see how the dimensions seem slightly off. The scale of like the size of bookshelves and windows and other things.
Yeah. So this is something that I was thinking after I watched it of, for anyone who had read House on Haunted Hill by Shirley Jackson, the whole thing about the house is that the way it's described is that it's slightly off. It's slightly askew. A lot of people don't like the book. They don't think it's scary because they're like, what is scary about this house? But it's the fact that everything just seems slightly out of place. Staircases, it's slightly like, it narrows too much in one place. The window is too large in one space. Like the walls seem slightly stick to something in another way. Like the dimensions of the entire house doesn't work. And that's like the creepy. And so in Paperhouse, I was like, this whole house and everything just seems slightly askew, and her drawings, everything is slightly off. And that's what made it creepy. Then I started thinking about, well, is that why some people think like kids' drawings are creepy? Because they don't have a quite understanding of, dimensions and how to draw people.
I think so. I mean, it can often come across as a bit uncanny when she starts to realize that what she's drawing manifests itself in her dreams. Then she starts drawing all these sort of like bits of furniture and snacks and other things for the house. And when she knows that the disabled boy Mark is in the house, she tries to draw him a artificial pair of legs, and all of these things come out the wrong size in her dream because she has no sense of scale. She just isn't that good at drawing. Yeah. And I like that aspect of it, but I think what I like even more is often when you're in a dream, I find my reaction to things are kind of skewed in that I have a very casual attitude to a lot of things, and I have the things that make me panic in a dream are not necessarily the things that make me panic in real life. In a dream state, I sort of casually accept things that are not are things that would actually freak me out if I saw them in the real world. And I think the thing about Paperhouse is when you see these two kids interact in like some of the fantastical things they just casually accept, and other things do freak them out, but it's not always what you think it would be.
But I find that interesting though, that people can be so accepting of things that if they believe that they are dreaming, they think, oh, this is the way it is. This is just how things are. I find that interesting as well in dream sequences in movies and just filmed about dreams, is that you just accept things because you believe they're asleep.
But I find in a lot of other movies where they depict dream sequences, they are much more, I don't know, people behave much more melodramatically. It's sort of, the visuals are much more sort of, I don't know, frantic. Whereas in this, I don't know, Bernard Rose films a lot of these sort of fantastical sights and sounds in a very casual way.
Yeah.
And sort of when, really scary things start to happen, when monsters start appearing, on the edge of the Paperhouse, about to lay siege to the place, it sort of does sneak up on you in a way and come as even more of a surprise because everything was so relaxed up to that point.
There was, okay, this is going to sound ridiculous saying this as a 34-year-old woman. There was a part where it actually snuck up on me and I got a jump scare. I'm sorry. Man, that sounds ridiculous. Being that this is, I guess, supposed to be a children's movie. I don't think it's a children's movie. I don't think it is. It's not. But like there was aspects of it that like parts where it actually did like get to me. That creeped me out. And that was like when the scene where the dad of like the big kind of monstrous kind of figure just jumps out. And it like I literally jumped in my seat. I was like, oh my God. And I think that, the bath scene, so when she's in the bath, that scene, like, really, like, startled me as well. When she's just having a bath and then, does she fall asleep? Is she, like, does she fall asleep in that scene? Or is that just her mind wandering, I guess? I don't know, because that freaked me out too.
I think it comes at her when she's at her most vulnerable as well. Yeah, as I said, it's been 4 or 5 years since I've read the novel. I remember the novel having, a much lighter, more whimsical tone to it. Yeah. And I know that Marianne Dreams has been adapted for the theatre and also for television before Paperhouse. I think it was in the 1970s. There was an adaptation. I haven't seen it. I don't know if it's more faithful to the book. But yes, I would say that what Matthew Jacobs and Bernard Rose did with this film was just basically take, I don't know, the basic plot and, characters of the novel and use that as a template And they sort of went off and did their own thing in terms of creating all of these, nightmarish visuals. I mean, there's darker elements to the book in terms of subtext. I think that the film just pretty much takes the subtext and makes it straight up text.
Yeah.
I believe that the film was well received at the time by critics. And because it was a fairly low budget film, like it broke even at the box office. And it sort of opened doors, in Hollywood for Bernard Rose. I mean, he went on to make Candyman and Immortal Beloveds, which were quite successful. I have no idea if the book is much more beloved and well known in England than it is in Australia, and maybe if any literary purists were upset by all the changes that were made.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to know. Like, I actually want to read the book now because I really like the movie. But you mentioned like budget and things like that. I think to me clearly I could see it was on a budget. However, I think it was so effective. The way that they made it all, like all the scenes and like I guess you call it the moors and everything, and then the actual Paperhouse itself. I think it was really well done and really well made, and it actually. I think if I liked it even more, it seemed to me an example of what you can do when it's clear it's limited budget, but you really focus on special effects. So not special effects, but you focus on effects that you can do yourself, like.
I think that a lot of the time, like I said, they lean into the fact that her drawings are crude and that the sets and props in the dream world are very, malformed and very dilapidated as a result. And I think that a lot of the, spooky ambience in this movie comes not from the setting so much as the sort of odd camera angles which sort of Bernard Rose filmed certain scenes with, and the score.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was good.
You want to go on about the score, you can. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I really liked it. I thought it was great. Like, I thought it was really well done.
I thought that the score was an interesting sort of hybrid of like classical orchestral textures and synthesizers.
Yeah.
Usually with like, some kind of electronic keyboard playing the main melody and all these sort of, deeper string textures, swirling away in the background. Something of an interesting story about the soundtrack for film music enthusiasts. And this was a kind of passing of the torch. There was a established British film composer named Stanley Myers. He's probably best known for doing the soundtracks for The Deer Hunter and Moonlighting. He had a very long career behind him, and in the 80s he sort of took on a bunch of younger composers as apprentices and sort of taught them about the craft of writing music for film. And one of them was this young German guy called Hans Zimmer, who has gone on to a very successful film career of his own, composing music for such iconic films as Rain Man, The Lion King, Gladiator, The Dark Knight, more recently the Dune movies, that he won an Oscar for one of those. They composed this together, like Stanley Myers and his protege, Hans Zimmer. And this was sort of like, I guess, a test run before sort of, Zimmer could spread his wings as a solo artist.
That's interesting because I really liked it.
What I meant about the score, though, was that a lot of the time it adds to the sort of sense of unease when, like, the imagery is quite mundane. I'm thinking of an earlier scene where the main character Anna is skipping school and she's hanging out with a friend at a railway station, and she has a fainting spell and falls unconscious. And the way she sort of looks down the train tunnel ahead of her is sort of it's unsettling because of the odd angles that Bernard Rose uses and the strange music that's playing. The image on its own isn't that out of the ordinary, though. Like, the setting is quite ordinary and mundane and everyday sort of thing. That's what I mean when I say how, like, the visuals and the music sort of, take everyday situations and twist them around into something disturbing. And I mean, you mentioned the bathtub scene where she sort of dozes off in the bath and her mind wanders and she's, taken back to the, dark world of the Paperhouse for a while. That's another example.
Well, it actually made me think about the reason that I love, again, color in film, especially in horror. It's that same technique where you can use this technique to create something that can seem garish or unsettling without not having to do much at all. It's just utilizing it in the right way. And I found the music in it just did it in the right way. It wasn't overdone or anything like that. I just think it was really great. I think it worked really well. And it was just a really good use of music without being too in your face.
Yeah. And I guess before we wrap things up, I'd like to just touch upon the acting, which goes a long way to sort of reinforcing the urgency of the situation.
Yeah.
Because like you could come into this movie thinking, oh well, it's just a dream, so what? It doesn't matter, what happens, because they're just gonna wake up anyway. I mean, I think the two young kids, Charlotte Burke and Elliot Spears, to play Anna and Mark, I think that they do look scared for their lives, and they do look, glad to see each other when they're like reunited once they've sort of, established a friendship, and that chemistry comes through, and even sort of like their comic timing in the scenes where they're arguing with each other. It sort of establishes that there's a gravitas to the Paperhouse sequences, the dreamworld. I don't know, that's as tangible as the scenes where like Anna's in the real world interacting with her parents. The dramatic stakes seem just as high.
I actually, at the end, I was thinking of the story, even though it's very different, but also the actors. It made me think of the actors in The Secret Garden. And I don't know if I was making unconscious parallels to like Colin being sick and things like that, and muscular dystrophy and things like that. But the actress in this, and then the actress who played Mary Lennox, I feel like they embodied the same sort of, I don't know, that same petulance, that childhood petulance, but also just they have such striking features, but also just the way they use themselves, like their facial features, the way they use expressions. I don't know why they pop in my head, but yeah.
I can see the parallels, because these are sick children who, don't take to their condition with grace. There are moments where they wallow in self-pity and throw tantrums and just, as I say, are brats.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, as with The Secret Garden, despite their sort of flaws, you do feel sorry for them. You do feel sympathetic towards them. And as with The Secret Garden, like, you realize that a lot of the anger that's in these children comes from a place of pain. Yeah. They have been hurt. They are sort of very insecure because they don't have a sort of stable home life, a sort of family unit they can trust. I don't know. It takes a lot of nuanced acting to portray a child character that is that flawed, that is that bratty, but still sympathetic, and you still care about them.
I did not think her a brat. I didn't think she was. I think she was someone who was clearly asking for help, who was clearly going through some issues, clearly sick. No one was listening to her. And I think maybe that's also why I thought of like that, like Mary, as she is. But the thing is, she was being bratish, but her parent did abandon her pretty much, and died. But it's like, but those parallels of a child who just wants to be nurtured or feeling neglected in some way, meet the sick boy, which, goes on a whimsical adventure. But again, back to like the acting though, I really thought they did really well, and I just thought it was weird that that's when my mind thought of. This actress reminds me of the actress who would be in Mary.
I can see the parallel, and
yeah.
But maybe the other thing is, like, I felt for the parents as well, despite their flaws. You made a good case that they're kind of neglectful and not always as attentive as they could be. But I always get the impression from watching Glenn Headley and Ben Cross in this that they meant well, like that for all their mistakes. Like, Glenn Headley's is clearly trying hard to engage with her daughter, even if she's not always succeeding in like connecting with her on an emotional level. She's trying to at least be a good provider in terms of like all the material things she needs, and really stressed out about that. And as for Ben Cross, like I I mean, he's playing two different characters, really. I mean, he's playing this sort of, I don't know, universal horror movie monster and all the like the dream sequences, and this sort of hulking, you know, menace of a character with a deformed face and, you know, deep booming voice. But in the real world sequences when we meet the dad, I got the impression that he was a guy who, you know, had made some mistakes, you know, maybe took a wrong road, but he's trying to get his life back on track. He's trying to make amends and is sort of sincerely trying to, you know, get back together with his family and heal all these old wounds.
Well, I definitely thought that at the end. So my perception of the parents changed. I still think you should listen to your kid a bit more. Just saying. However, towards the end when they go on, you know, the family kind of seaside kind of trip, I was like, okay, so you know, and like when she runs off and the, like the mother's like, where are you? And like in like the little hotel that they're staying in. And then I thought, well, that's something that kids do and it's annoying. And you have that fear of where is my child. And so that's sort of when my mentality circled back onto, okay, yes, she is just a mother who has this child who perhaps is bratish, could have an overactive imagination. I mean, she's saying these ludicrous things. Of course, she got to not believe these things. So then, again, it took me back to the boy who cried wolf. And I think I just had so many different like thoughts of I am on both the mother's, like parents' side and on the child's side. That makes sense. Like I can see where both of them are struggling. And also I think that's why I really like the movie again.
Life is a bit more complex than just sides, you know. I mean, But I was just going to say, one sort of common trope in like 1950s children's fiction, like English children's fiction. I mean, I'm thinking especially like Enid Blyton in her sort of, you know, Faraway Tree and, you know, Fantastic Five books, things like that, is this trope of sort of free roaming children who, you know, manage to sort of sneak off and have adventures when the parents aren't around, and the parents always seem like astonishingly unobservant.
That's what I thought.
But in all of these sort of 1950s children's adventure stories, it's sort of, you know, played in a very lighthearted, whimsical way, and, you know, often like their bungling, unobservant nature is played like kind of for comedy. And there's a little joke about it at the end of the story. But the thing is, I don't think that Marianne Dreams, the novel, was ever that bad. But like I said, the parents in the book had a lot less problems. The child was, you know, more like, well, Marianne, the equivalent of Anna in the novel, has a much more pleasant disposition generally, and is just sort of a more well-adjusted child. And I think giving like the parents and the child all these neuroses kind of gives them a reason to be so neglectful and unobservant sometimes, whereas in the book, as I recall, it was just another example of like the 50s children's story of just like the parents are unobservant because, you know, that allows for the plot for the children to do all these things by themselves, you know.
In my thesis, I'm writing about 18th century, 19th century, like parenting child, you know, like parenting tropes and things like that. And just the differences in parenting and differences in how you're supposed to parent and what was normal to you know, a normal way to parent people. And so even just watching films like this, even if there's a few decades apart, it's still so interesting to see that the differences in what was completely normal to let your child roam around the countryside. Where are they? They're on the cliff somewhere. Hopefully not off the cliff.
Yeah, and maybe some of these changes were the effect of like updating the story from the 1950s to the 1980s.
Yeah. I know, but I still thought it was like really cool. And I know. I just found it interesting that I kept going back and forth about, you know, thinking about the perspective of the parents, especially the mother, I think. being mother myself, and then going back to the perspective of a child and thinking, well, both people are having issues and both people are unable to communicate effectively, which is basically the root evil of many problems. It's just ineffective communication. Without going on a tangent, it's just, I think a lot of it was like parents and children can't always understand each other. We think that we can. We think as parents we understand our children, but we don't, because we're not children anymore. We have ascended. Children can't understand parents because they don't have the responsibilities. So again, that could also be another theme for the film, not understanding complexities of parents or children. Again, this film just left me with so many questions and so many thoughts and not so many ideas.
Well, I think
I loved it.
I think what I love about Paperhouse is it is a film that brings up all these sort of philosophical conundrums. And it is also an intimate family drama about like emotional troubles that I think a lot of families can relate to.
Yeah.
And also, in addition to like all of the sort of kitchen sink drama and sort of more abstract philosophizing, it's also a very visually striking film.
Yeah.
Bernard Rose does so much with so little in terms of like creating this, otherworldly ambience and these visuals that are just totally unique and like nothing else.
Yeah.
So it's a feast for the eyes, but also for the mind and for the heart.
I just loved it. And I just like to point out the humor in it also, just the subtle humor of like, I made a note of, I don't like that frizzy-haired bully and I hope she gets what's coming to her. And then the point of, but it's my birthday. Well, you should have thought of that before. That's like, things like that I thought was funny as well, that it just had the, surrealist kind of horror aspect, the family aspects, the drama, the emotional aspects, being a child growing up, and then just silly things like that. And I think, yeah, all of that coupled with the beautiful imagery of it, the beautiful landscape, like the cinematography was gorgeous. I think it just made it a really well-rounded film, which I don't understand why more people are talking about.
That's all for this week, folks. Thanks for listening. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing and sharing this podcast with your friends. If you have any questions or would like to provide suggestions for future episodes, you can send an email to fantasypodcastfeedback@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.